the podcast is the ultimate front end part of your value ladder. And also you get to figure out what people want. So really, I feel it should be done first and gives you all this content to work with to then write your book and your high value offer.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It's your host, Adam Adams. And today I'm joined with somebody across the pond, quite far on the Gold Coast of Australia. You'll probably recognize the accent here in a second. I'm just curious, what time of the day is it for you right now, Lloyd?
Adam, what's up? Thanks for having me on the show. Super excited. It's 7:19 a.m.
7 in the morning. And when you and I got on this call, you were finishing another call.
Yes.
Random question. When do you start your day?
Today was 5 a.m., but
if you were in the US, would you need to start at 5 a.m. or do you have to do that because you have clients in the US or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was interesting you asked that because we had some of our European team on a call at 5 and then some USA people at 6. And then I've got you at 7. So yeah, if it was just in Australia, I wouldn't have to get up at 5. Yeah.
Here's a good place to take this. Let me just inform the listener a little bit about where we might take this. Lloyd has, I couldn't count the amount of degrees that are behind him or the one that he's about to add to it. He's got a podcast called Money Grows on Trees. He's married. He has been a developer. He sells supplements online. So he's been doing a lot. So he must manage his time well. I'm curious, maybe first, like, do you work a shit ton of hours compared to like the average human, or are you just managing your time a lot better? What do you kind of,
Good question. The secret to it, and the answer is leverage. So we have a lot of people leverage. So that's a lot of people in our team doing lots of stuff that I don't have to do. And also a lot of systems that do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So like running a team that does our marketing and ads, and a team that does our selling and closing, and a team that does our organic marketing and administrative help. So it's not really me just doing everything, but I just try and stay in my zone of genius. So I try and figure out where I'm most effective for the day, and I try and stay in those areas, and I don't try and do everything myself. So I do outsource, not my genius. That's the secret.
I think that I've struggled with what I'm about to share. And if I've struggled with it, Lloyd, maybe you have, and maybe you have some insights for our listener who maybe they've already been struggling for a while, or they will as they try to grow things. And it's like, what's first, the chicken or the egg? And what I'm thinking is, how do you hire in a smart way so that you're not losing so much revenue, but also so that you have the people on the team before you need them? Because if you don't, maybe you're working too hard. Yeah. And it sounds like with all of your different businesses, and I didn't even mention the books, you've written 2 or more books.
Yeah, 2 books.
Is that right?
Yeah. 2 books.
Yeah. So like I've been trying to write the same freaking book for 4 years.
Okay.
And it's pretty close, but I can't like finish it. There's something wrong with dedicating the time to it.
Sure.
And so I'm thinking you must have mastered these teams that you're mentioning, because you don't have to do everything. But it's scary. It's scary to hire. So let us know, like, if we've got a podcast that's part of a business and we want our business to grow, how should we be thinking about that?
Well, it's a really good question. It's one of the most challenging things people face in business, if not the most challenging. And the thing with getting wealthy, and people want to build wealth, that's why they're in business, right? And the trick to it is those that scale their time, scale their money. And no one's focusing on scaling their time. They're just trying to scale their money, but they get stuck because they're trying to do everything themselves. So to answer your question, Adam, and it's a really good question, is you outsource to other people when you realize it's costing you money to do everything yourself. So if you're losing money and income and deals and stuff because you're doing everything yourself, that's the telltale sign that you need to outsource it, and you will feel cooked. You will feel overwhelmed. You will feel like things will start falling apart. And that's the sign that you must find someone. And how you begin that journey is the very first hire is, let's say it's podcasting. for example, the first person you want to get on board is someone to do the production stuff after you've done your genius. You record the episode and you want them to do the production stuff. You want to push it out through the platforms, check the sound quality, add the intro, outro. You want someone to do that for you, and then someone to run some sort of ad campaign to it too. Like, you don't want to be doing that stuff yourself if you're trying to build a business with your podcast. So the time to do it would be when you're just absolutely fried and things are starting to fall apart. Like, I need someone. So the best first hire is administration hire.
Personal story. I became an investor when I was in college because my dad was an investor, a real estate investor, and he gifted me a piece of property, and then he made me pay $100 because the CPA made me. But I was in college, and $100 was a shit ton of money. Like, I was like, Dad, like, what kind of gift is that? I have to buy it anyway. But it ended up being pretty good because 2 years later, I sold it, and for a massive amount, especially compared to the $100 that I invested and all the taxes. I think I made like a 12,000% return or something like that. I made more when I sold it than I would make if I used my degree. Like, you've got all these degrees behind you, and I don't think you've used yours either. If I would have graduated with my music education degree, I'm no attorney like you. Well, if I would have graduated with my music education degree, I would have made certain amount per year. And I made more just selling that one little piece of land than I would have made in a whole year. So it changed things for me. And I started to decide I'm going to be a real estate investor. I ended up purchasing my first property. And I made this mistake. You're talking about if you're starting a podcast, get that stuff that kind of holds you back off of your plate as soon as possible, like the post-production and everything. What I ended up doing is this piece of property was a rental for me, and I was supposed to make $300 a month. And then I thought about hiring a company. Yeah. And they were going to charge $300. And I was like, F that. My only income is going straight to these people. And Lloyd, you're going to laugh. And then I also wrote my own contract like a dumbass. I wrote my own contract instead of hiring a contract attorney. And so here's what happened. I was working for like less than minimum wage for my little apartment that I owned, my little triplex. I was working less than minimum wage to make that $300. It took me like lots of hours a month. And I didn't want to spend money on an attorney because it sounded expensive. So I wrote my own contract, and both things came to bite me because I had a business where I was making $20,000, netting $20,000 a month. But now that I'm spending a shit ton of time with this like triplex, I'm not making any money. I'm like, it sucked. And so I'm also writing my own contracts, and that came to bite me in the ass since I actually had evictions. This was in 2008 when people couldn't pay. I had evictions, and my contract was so shitty that I lost out on a ton of money. And I remember thinking, like, if I would have had a professional team managing that, they would have had the contracts. They would have had this. They would have had this. And I went from netting 20 grand a month in this one business to focusing so much on trying to keep my apartment going, my triplex going, that I ended up making a lot less in my company that I owned and was doing just fine. And so my hourly rate was worth something, but now
you were majoring in minor things.
So you majoring in minor things. So you're saying do it as soon as it gets a little bit overwhelming?
Well, as soon as it starts costing you money, is the best one. So, like, for example, it was costing you $20,000 a month to go and run that contract and run that property. That's what it was really costing.
I love what you said. What if I think to myself, quote, and I think the listener might be thinking this, it's already costing me money. How would I have money to pay someone else to do that right now? Well, what if they're so scared about making that?
That's a fair comment. Then it's not, if it's costing you money to, like, if you're doing it yourself, so if you're doing your post-production and your ads and everything yourself, it's costing you your time. And you might be running some ad money to it, but you've got to have a business in place. So, like, if your podcast is not generating income, and it's not a business, it's a hobby. And so you have to decide, is my podcast a business or a hobby? And if it's a hobby, well, you don't want to spend any money on it, right? That makes sense. But if you want to front end it on your business, and I'd encourage people to do that because it's one of the most important parts of your marketing strategy. And so if you have that as a business, you must be making some money in your business. But if you're not making enough to cover those costs, then you do it all yourself. That's fine. But the moment that you are making money from your podcast and you're still spending time on that stuff, the moment it's costing you money, like for you, for example, Adam, when you were doing all that stuff yourself with the real estate, it was costing you $20,000 a month to do that stuff. It wasn't just costing, it's a lost opportunity. So as soon as you start losing opportunities, losing deals, losing joy, even too, get rid of that stuff that you don't want to do and outsource it. And just a point, the reason why, in your story, a great example of it, and for me too, it's the same thing. The reason why we don't outsource stuff is because we want to have control. And there's something else, a security or safety desire in us to hold on to, and it's just ego. No one can do it as good as us. What if someone makes a mistake? You got to let that go and empower other people. You're never going to get super wealthy.
I'll say for sure, when I had my podcast, my first podcast, which I sold like in 2019 or 2020, I kept trying to outsource it. But the truth is that they literally weren't doing it the way that I was hoping. And so I would take it back and then reluctantly give it to another person. And then I would take it back and then I'll give it to a different person. Then I would take it back. And I was so stressed out that I kept doing this. It kept being a yo-yo. So if we stay on just the podcast outsourcing, if we just stay on that, like it could be a legitimate fear that what if this person doesn't do it as well? Then what happens?
Totally. Look, you tarnished with the same brush as me. When you started outsourcing things, they weren't the right fit or the right person. And unfortunately, you thought that everyone else was going to be like that too. And it's a painful experience. Like, oh my God, that's brutal. It's just the wrong person. And what happens is instead of saying, oh, I wish I found someone, you say, I wish I was better at hiring people because I suck at finding talent. And so I started to take ownership. I'm like, well, hang on a second. What are the traits that these people need to have? And how can I give them a trial before I bring them on to test their ability? So I started actually just becoming better at identifying talent and hiring people than blaming the fact that outsourcing didn't work. So I started taking ownership of that. And now what I do is I disc profile them. I send them a DISC profile to do for free to get their personality traits. And if they're too steady or they're too compliant, I don't hire them because they're not doers. So straight away, I'm personality testing people before I bring them on. Let's give you a 2-week trial. Send me some of your work. Send me the work you do with me for 2 weeks. And then after that, I'll decide whether we're going to start or not.
Yeah. I got so serious about making sure that people were the right fit. When I started my podcast post-production company, what we do is we actually have we'll hire 2 or 3 people at a time and we will do a trial. Just like you said, it's a week or 2. And then we will either keep none of them or keep one of them or keep all 3 of them. And so we've been doing that. We have now got 37 people on the team. And I love that you brought up the trial because it's the thing that has solved us the most is all 3 of you guys or gals are going to edit the same things.
There you go.
We're going to check all of them against each other, see who's doing it, who's not doing it, give you some feedback, see how the next project goes. And only the ones that make the cut are going to do this editing because I'm a little OCD. I'm a little anal retentive and people call me a micromanager. So,
okay, you have high standards by the sounds of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good way to say it. I have high standards. That's cool to have high standards. But I tell you one thing I've noticed, and you may notice this too, there are people out there who's better at stuff than me. And I want to find more of them. You know, when you find someone who's better than you, when we outsourced our sales, I'm pretty good at sales, and it can be your undoing or your block. It can be a problem if you're good at stuff. Easy to outsource stuff you can't do, you don't like because it's easy. But if you are actually good at something, could be your bane. It could be your kryptonite. So if you're great at stuff, that can be your flaw. And so for me, it was sales. And as soon as I was like, no one can do this as good as me, as soon as I let that go, the girls we have in our sales team are so good, they double my close rate. They're that good. And so it was a punch, and I'm like, you're not as good as what you think. Get your ego out of the way. So I got out of there, and we scaled. So I think for everyone to understand, it's not always just outsourcing your stuff you don't like or you're not good at. It's actually being able to outsource the stuff you're good at. And that's when you can really build, you end up what happening in your life, you get so valuable as a resource that you end up staying in a comfort zone of like, I'm so good at this, so you stay there, but you never grow and get to where you need to go, which is ultimately as an entrepreneur, it's buying and selling businesses and then taking things public. Like that's the highest point of entrepreneurship. You have to do that journey, but I'm always on this journey of like, okay, what do I have to do to level up? How do I step out of this now? How do I become like Richard Branson where he's not involved in inside any business? You know?
I want to talk about you mentioned about the podcast being part of your business.
Yes.
And you making money with your podcast. And I want to transition to your podcast, Money Grows on Trees.
Sure.
And find out what it is that you do for a business. Why is it this podcast? Why are you doing this podcast?
Yeah.
And if I can throw lots more questions on you. So how does it fit with your business?
Yeah.
And then additionally, actually, let's start there. I got so many questions. How does it fit with your business? And then I actually have a follow-up question that I'm going to ask now.
Yeah.
You've written 2 books. You have a podcast. So I'm curious, should you have a book? Should you have a business, a podcast, or should you have both? Because I'm wondering if the listeners like, maybe I should just have a book.
Yeah.
I do it once and I'm done.
Yeah. Look, that's such a great question. And when you build a business, I built it all wrong, just so everyone knows. And it's successful. So you're never going to like perfectly build this thing in sequence as you should, but I'm going to give you some value here that hopefully helps you to mitigate some of the mistakes I made. So the very first thing that we did in our financial education and coaching business was I wrote a book, and we have some little courses that people buy. So that was like automated because yes, you've done it once and you get paid again and again, which is cool. So it's like royalties. We've run ads to that on Facebook. And so people buy the book through ads. They buy some of the courses, and then we introduced a high value offer or a high ticket offer, which is a 12-month mentorship program with myself that I run, group coaching. And so that's our higher value offer where people come into the book, get the courses, want to work with me closely. They get to purchase the proximity and the access and the knowledge, and they do that for a year. So that's our business. It's a financial coaching business. Now, when I first started that with the team, we didn't have a podcast. But I kept hearing Gary Vaynerchuk talking about podcast, and it incidentally I was interviewed on podcast because I had a book. And the guy, one of our mutual friends who set this up for us, he said to me, dude, why don't you have a podcast? And my head was like, oh my God, I don't want to get the microphone and interview people and like, oh, I don't know the tech stuff. I don't know what to do. I thought this whole podcasting world was some like big movie production. I'm like, I just don't have time for this. All these this limiting belief stuff popping up. But push came to shove. He ended up, I worked with him. So I think this is the secret. Get someone to help you with the production stuff. Like that's what helped me. So like with yourself, Adam, like had I have met you, then it would have been like, dude, you would have said the same thing. Like, dude, why don't you have a podcast? I'm like, I need someone to help me. You're like, I can help you. I'm like, cool. That's how it happens, right? So it's really important to get help if you need it. So I got some help and I started it. But what I didn't realize was how powerful it would become in our financial education business. So now what happens is podcasting is so beautiful because it is a recurring value proposition. You record one episode and it gets played thousands of times for people. Or like we're in like 160 countries or something. I don't know what we're in. We're in some crazy number of countries. And so people are listening to me while I'm sleeping. So yes, it does require effort, but it is so valuable now to our business because here's the value ladder that happens now. Almost every time someone that buys my high ticket offer, I said, how did you find me? They go, you know what, man? Someone sent me the podcast. And I'm like, good. Then I found your book. Then I found your course. And then I wanted to work. I'm like, cool. So the podcast is the ultimate front end part of your value ladder. Had I have known this, to answer your second part of the question, is do I do a book or do I do a podcast? I wish I had started this podcast flipping 10 years ago, right? Truly. Because what happens when you start a podcast is, number one, you get very clear on your message. You get very clear on communicating a message and your story. You build an organic and amazing audience, and it's free to do that. It's so simple. It's easy to start. It's so simple. And also, you get to figure out what people want. So if you write a book, guess what? You go and get a ghostwriter from guru.com. You say, dude, I have these 135 episodes on here about all this stuff. These are the highest ranking ones. Can you please write me a book? Covers a lot of these key lessons and I'll fill in the gaps. So really, your podcast is this, I feel it should be done first and gives you all this content to work with to then write your book and your course and your high value offer. I think it has to come first.
Excellent. Love it. So you said you started your book and the coaching program and you started running ads to it.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you are selling lots of your high tickets because of your podcast. So why run ads?
Well, the first thing is there's no money in a book. Anyone who wants to write a book and make money, I'm sorry to give you this news, but you ain't going to make any money. So our book is a low ticket, loss leader value proposition. Is highly valuable. It's like $9 and they get a free audio. So it's a really good offer. And they get, some bonuses with that. So it's really cool, but it's not going to sell itself. And even if I had it on the shelves, everyone will tell you it doesn't sell. So you've got to actually get traffic and eyeballs on your book. So the objective of the book was, well, we're going to get eyeballs on this by doing ads. And as a result of that, they then get our order bumps and courses and they end up coming through. So ads is just imperative. Like businesses must advertise, like without a doubt. And so what people don't realize is everyone's stuck in organic world. And I was just at an event on the weekend with Gary Vaynerchuk and another young guy, Ethan, who organized to have him come and do a fireside chat. And there was about 2,500 people at the event, at the broader event, the big event before. And 90% of them were in those seats because of ads. Gary got 10% in from his organic reach, Gary Vaynerchuk. And so you think about the power of ads, there's a good example of the power of ads. Then I read a statistic, which blew me away that I'll never forget. 98.5% of seven-figure businesses have paid traffic.
98.5%.
98.5%. I was like, okay, like you want to have paid traffic, but it's very challenging to send paid traffic to an organic podcast to grow it when you're not making money. So I get that. But you've got to have some other offer, because when people come to your podcast and they love your content and they build a trust and rapport with you and you seemingly have some skills they need, they will pay you to shortcut that journey. So you ought to have some way to monetize your skills and knowledge. So I think it goes hand in hand with the podcast that you want to have some sort of offer to help someone solve a problem. And I know people now, and you'll be the expert at this, Adam, but I know people now that are not using a book for the front end of their funnel. They're literally leading in with podcasting. So for example, it would probably be beneficial for me as I'm saying this, I'm kind of like working out in my head. I'm like, shit, I got to get the team to give some ads straight into our Spotify account. But it would be effective to add advertising into our podcast now. Like that would make sense because it's obviously valuable because people find me, then they find my high value. So you got to have ads. You got to have ads.
It's funny because my team, we run ads for people. We like try to grow their people. And a lot of the people that come to me, they're like, okay, are these ads going to go to my business or are they going to go to this? And I say the exact same thing that you just said. I said, no, my objective is to grow the podcast as big as it can and get it so you're triggering algorithms within like podcast playing platforms. So now the podcast promotes you also. So we're getting the ads to grow and we're getting people to subscribe and download and actually listen and give ratings and reviews through ads, advertisement, like private messages and Facebook ads and stuff like that. And the clients, they always want people to come to their business. And I'm like, trust me, if we grow the podcast, if we put the money into the podcast, it's going to happen anyways.
Yep.
So
100%. You are 100% accurate. That is so true. And I only think, and you would know this too, that the reason why people don't pay for ads to, let's say, their podcast, like, see, for us, our book funnel makes a lot of sense and they get to the podcast that way. So we are actually sending paid traffic to our podcast that way. It's just, it's not the front of value ladder, so to speak, in our paid strategy. But people don't put paid traffic because they're not monetizing the back end of their podcast with anything extra. So as soon as, like, for example, with you, you'd be like, I imagine you'd be like, dude, I love your podcast. What's your high ticket offer? And if the clients are like, well, I don't have one, you're like, well, let's create one, build one. Like, talk to my friend who does that. He can help you. Because once you have that, I will then be able to scale your podcasting. Because once they monetize it, you'd step in and be like, I'll do your ads. And I think that's a wonderful tripod of a meeting of intelligent business strategy.
Yeah. I want to ask you how we monetize after. And I want to add to it, not advertise. I want to add to it that a lot of people are kind of afraid to monetize their show. Afraid or reluctant might be a better word. Reluctant because they don't want to offend anyone. B, because they're scared if somebody else is better than them in their same field. They're like, well, I'm not the best. This person does this one thing better than me. And this other person does this one thing better than me. Mm-hmm. And so they're reluctant either because of insecurities or specifically because they think that they're going to offend their listener if they have an offer like on their podcast, for example.
Okay.
So I want to hear from you of a strategy, a way that you put a call to action through your show.
Yeah, cool. That's really cool.
Money Grows on Trees.
Yeah, awesome. So our Money Grows on Trees podcast is free on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and although there's a few platforms it's on, and we want it to be free. And so in that sense too, we don't monetize from ads on the podcast. So we don't get any ad revenue through the podcast. That's the first thing. You could, but we don't. But where we do earn is like, for example, in the podcast, in the show notes, Phil will put in there like my book link, right, to get my book. And that brings them through the value ladder. That's the most important thing for them to do. And so that's really what the offer is on most of the episodes. If I'm going to make an offer, it'll be that. But it's very organic. So it's like, I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm doing a show. I'm like, hey, welcome back to the show. My name is Lloyd Ross. And this episode is titled yada, yada, yada. Before I jump into the episode, just want to let you know, if you want to, we've got a brand new book. The link is in the show notes. If you're listening to these episodes and you're wanting to learn more, you want to grab that book, go click on it. Super valuable. You get a free audio. You get this, you get that, you get that. Amazing value. Click on it. It's down below. Now, here's what I want to talk to you about. Boom, 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 boom. And at the end of the show, I'll say stuff like, hey, thanks for leaving us a 5-star review. Really appreciate it. Share this onto your stories. Tag me in it, and I'll give you some followers back, and I'll say thank you, and give me some episode ideas. And don't forget to grab our book. The link's in the show notes below. You have a wealthy week. See you later. So I'm bookending the actual show with, and I used to do it at the very end, but I'm like, I'm going to do it at the start. It's my show. It's my show. It's my time. It's free. You don't have to listen to any ads. Listen, there's amazing content, and there's very amazing content on there. Like, I make sure it's valuable stuff. And so I'm like, I'm doing this because you're going to reciprocally give me something back. And I want that, and I'm going to do that. So don't worry. Like, if you're not running ads to your like, as in, if you're not advertising through Spotify and stuff and putting ads inside your podcast, you're literally giving your stuff away for free. Do not for a second devalue yourself and think you can't pitch something in there. But don't be like laborious about it, like, buy my stuff. Just like, hey, if you want to learn more about me and work with me, grab my book. It's $9. Like, it's okay to do that, right?
So I've heard people doing the books as free plus shipping.
Sure.
You probably heard that too. Free plus shipping. With you, it's $9, and then they get some audio, some additional
free audio
stuff.
and a free coaching call. Yeah.
And a free coaching call.
Yeah.
Damn, bro. For $9.
Yeah.
That would literally
valuable.
Be so stupid not to do.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a great offer. Yeah.
Yeah. That's huge. I want to do that. So now I need to finish my effing book and I need to sell it for $9 plus. I don't even know if I need an audio, but like even a free coaching call.
People love audio. They love audio. Like, you just got to give the audio away for free. Otherwise they'll ping you and say, hey, man, I'm an audio person. You're going to be like, oh my God. So you just got to give it to them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But stuff. And how does it work after that? Like, I'm listening, I'm hearing this idea of monetizing my show with a value ladder, doing a free show being the top of the funnel, being a $9 book being like the second step. What are the other steps? Like, what should the other steps be for another podcaster who's listening?
So beyond that, you mean?
Yeah.
So what happens then is, obviously you're building this great database of people who have a readership. So as an author, you're building this great readership database. And there are those that we have little courses that people want to take around micro investing and money and mindset. And we have those. And people, they can opt in to buy them for like $26 and $40. Like, there's a few different price points. And they want to learn more and commit more and do more. So they do that. But then what happens is, we do offer coaching, a complimentary coaching course. It's incredible. And we have wonderful coaches that jump on. And if people are really having breakthroughs on that call, and they just realize, if I got this from this, I want to continue this conversation. And so then they can join one of our mentorship programs for a year, and they get that conversation for the balance of the year. That's our main core offer. So it's coaching. And I think that it's a big space, very popular. Everyone wants to be a coach, but you do have to come in with skill set and level of experience to give people that. But you don't have to start out big. Like, when I first started, it was like, I think I did my first one-on-one was like $997. It was just like, hey, You want to work with me? I've got some cool stuff I can show you. $900. Yep. And you get like a few calls for that. You got to start out small, but you've got to have it. Whatever your niche is for your podcast, I promise you people are wanting to work with you to shortcut their success, and they'll pay you for that. So I don't know what it is, but if you go and you think, like, if you read Alex Hormozi's book, $100 million Offers, it'll really give you a good sense of what can you craft as your offer.
I have made possibly one of the very last questions before we jump off today. And this comes because you're a financial person. You didn't even need your law degree. You started doing developing, and you take your profits from one company. And as we were talking in the green room, you're always investing some of that into buying parts of other businesses and really growing and allowing that to happen. I know that takes somebody who's disciplined and savvy to be able to do. And then you come around and you see these new entrepreneurs that might make their first $100,000, and then they purchase Ferrari with it because they've always wanted the Ferrari, and they really want to show that they did something. And it gets us as entrepreneurs, it can get many of us into big trouble because we're putting it into like the wrong type of asset or depreciating asset. And so I want to think through, if our listener took your advice, they hired somebody to support them with their podcast, they had some type of offer on their podcast, whether it's a book or coaching or a ladder of different things, and they make their first 10K in a month, they make their first 20K in a month, they make their first 100K in a month. How do we be kind of disciplined like you and not like get that ego away and not like overspend?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I guess for me, my background, I was very observant. And what I saw when people did that, it's called new money. So they come into money for the first time and they've never had much. Like, oh my God, I'm wealthy, got 100K. Firstly, there's taxes to pay out of that. So don't spend it all at once. And then the second thing is that you've got to reinvest some of it back in growing and scaling your business. Okay, that's fine. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And then you've got to pay yourself some for personal expenses, and you should pay yourself 10% to invest and diversify into other assets like real estate or shares. So just take 10% of everything you make, put it to the side, and put it into other shares or real estate for other income streams and capital growth. And frankly, when you do that and you've got those percentages, so some goes to the tax office, some goes to scaling and growing my business and myself, and then some goes to my personal expenses, and some goes to diversification. There's kind of 4 buckets you put the money in. No matter how rich you get, those 4 buckets have to continue. Like, it won't matter. So like, get the 4 buckets done properly at the start and stick to those percentages for the rest of your life. And you will be super wealthy, super structured. You won't get in trouble by the IRS, and you will still enjoy your life as well as buying assets and scaling your business. Like, there are 4 things you can do with that money. But what happens to people, like you said, Adam, is often they just spend it all on their cruise or whatever. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create envy in other people because they want those people to lean into them to buy their stuff. And so it's a very intrepid marketing strategy because envious people are dangerous. So you don't really want to create envy by putting all your stuff on Instagram. You want to create value in the world. And if you are a person of value instead of creating envy, you're going to build a bigger business, be super wealthy anyway. And when you want to get the Ferrari, it'll be like a byproduct. It'll be like, hey, babe, what do you want to do today? You want to go get a Ferrari? Like, it will be some nonchalant conversation. It's not the big be all and end all of your success. So you've always got to have that goal, like the red Ferrari or the Lambo. Leave it for a while because it'll keep you hungry too. Don't go and get the stuff that gives you fuel. Don't get it straight away. Put it on your vision board for like, in the next 10 years, I'm going to go buy that Ferrari. But do it under the right circumstances where it's like, I could buy 3 in one go if I wanted to, but you just go buy one. And then you'll realize that that's not the path to joy. And you'll sell it to someone else and you'll become a monk. But whatever.
I love that answer, bro. It really resonates. That really resonates. My favorite part is how you said, be a person of value, not a person of envy. That's awesome. Really makes sense.
Yeah. Just helps you too. Like, it will get you out of state, keep you out of trouble.
I appreciate you spending so much time with us on the podcast and supporting us. If you're listening, and I know you are, to those listeners, the Money Grows on Trees podcast, the link is already in the show notes. Also, Lloyd's business, the link to his business is in the show notes, and any social media that he wanted to share is already in the show notes. So just scroll down, connect with him. I definitely want to listen to your podcast and 100% sure that I'm going to get your $9 offer for free coaching. There's no way I'm going to avoid that. This has been a very valuable conversation for me. We took it in a bit of a different direction than some of our other episodes. With that said, I still think it's been an episode that all podcasters should listen to. So really appreciate it. Hey, also, if you're listening, I recorded a few episodes. I got real excited about some topics that I knew you needed to have. And so I just spent some time recording a bunch of episodes all in a row. And I'm stoked about that because the next episode's one of those. So don't go anywhere. It's going to be a short episode. I will see you there. By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.